June 3, 2013. 3 cavers entered Hughes Cave in Alabama. Only 2 could exit on their own. The third was found and guided out by rescue teams. The evening was hot and muggy in Morgan County, Alabama. It was a late spring night, the kind where the air feels warm and is filled with the chirping sounds of crickets. Above ground, the temperature was around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside Hughes Cave, the temperature was a constant 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough to require layered clothing, but not uncomfortably cold. Joseph Hockett was a young caver. He stood at the entrance of Hughes Cave with 2 friends, all 3 eager for exploration. They weren't trained cave explorers. They had minimal equipment, like flashlights. But they lacked the specialized training, backup systems, and knowledge that separate casual exploration from serious exploration. Hughes Cave is located on Brindley Mountain, south of Decatur. It's a significant cave system extending for kilometers through limestone. The cave contains narrow crawls, large chambers, and passages that wind back and forth through the rock, capable of disorienting even the most experienced cavers. But in 2013, Hughes Cave had another feature. According to the Dogwood City Grotto's cave access list, Hughes Cave was habitat for endangered species, primarily bats. Disturbing these populations could lead to serious ecological consequences. The cave had been restricted to protect these bat colonies. These 3 young men either didn't know this or didn't care. They entered the cave in the afternoon. The entrance was a dark opening in the slope surrounded by vegetation, relatively easy to access. Once inside, the cave opened into passages, branching in multiple directions. Some took you deeper into the mountain, others led you around in circles back to where you started. Without a map or prior knowledge of the system, navigation was purely guesswork. They proceeded with their lights piercing the darkness. In some sections, the ceiling was so low they had to crawl. In other places, the ceiling rose, revealing chambers large enough to stand in. The rock surfaces were damp, slickened by water filtering through limestone for thousands of years. Time flows differently underground. There's no natural light, no distinction between day and night. It's very easy to lose track of how long you've been inside. Minutes feel like hours. Hours pass unnoticed. At some point, Joseph Hockett's light began to dim. Batteries don't last forever. Most flashlights and headlamps begin losing power after a few hours of continuous use. An experienced caver plans for this. They carry backup lights, extra batteries. They never rely on a single light source. Joseph had no backups. The light gradually weakened. The beam that once illuminated entire chambers now barely reached the walls, and then it went out completely. If you've never experienced true darkness, it's hard to understand. When lights go out in a cave, there's no ambient light, no moonlight filtering through windows, no distant streetlights, no glow from electronic devices. There's complete darkness where you can hold your hand an inch from your face and see absolutely nothing. Joseph had suddenly gone blind. His friends' lights were still on, but in the winding passages of Hughes Cave, even a few meters of distance can completely separate people. Sound echoes strangely underground. Voices bounce off walls, distorting direction. A sound from the left can seem to come from above. Someone ahead can feel like they're behind. Joseph tried to follow his friends, but without light, every step was uncertain. He couldn't see obstacles, couldn't tell where the passage narrowed. He moved slowly, trying to maintain direction by touching the walls. Then he became separated from the group. We don't know exactly how this happened. Maybe he took a wrong turn at a junction. Maybe he stopped to rest and the others continued without noticing. Maybe he called out, but wasn't heard among the echoes. What we know is this. Joseph Hockett was left completely alone in the depths of the cave system, in total darkness. His friends realized he was missing. They called out, searched nearby passages. But Hughes' cave was vast, and without a systematic search, finding someone in the darkness was nearly impossible. They made a decision: exit the cave and call for help. What decision would you have made? Stay in the cave to search for your friend, or exit and call for help? When they emerged from Hughes' cave that evening, the sun had set. The warm evening had cooled. They immediately notified authorities. The Morgan County Rescue Team was informed. Experienced cave rescue volunteers, including members of the local grotto trained in underground rescue operations, were called. These teams had the equipment, training, and knowledge to navigate complex cave systems safely. But even for professionals, finding someone lost in a cave is difficult. The rescue teams mobilized quickly. They gathered their equipment: lights, ropes, communication devices, medical supplies. They reviewed what information they had about Hughes' cave. They spoke with Joseph's friends, trying to understand how far they'd gone, which passages they'd used, where Joseph might be. Then they entered the cave. Underground rescue is methodical. You can't rush. You must carefully check every passage, every side tunnel, every chamber. You call out constantly, hoping to hear a response. You look for signs: footprints in mud, displaced stones, anything showing someone passed through. The rescue team spread throughout the cave. They checked main passages first, then side routes. Their lights swept walls and ceilings. Their voices echoed through chambers. And somewhere in the darkness, Joseph heard them. He called out. His voice echoed through the passages, and the rescuers heard him. They moved toward the sound, navigating narrow passages until they reached the point where Joseph was trapped. The operation continued systematically, with communication between teams. After hours of underground work, when they reached him, Joseph was exhausted and shaken by his ordeal. But he was alive. The rescue team assessed his condition. He wasn't physically injured. No broken bones, no hypothermia. He'd been in darkness for hours, but his body had endured. They gave him water. They gave him a working light. And they slowly guided him toward the entrance. Joseph Hockett walked out of Hughes' cave on his own feet that night. The rescue was successful. According to rescue authorities, the operation was considered easy for trained cave rescue teams. But for the trapped caver, the situation was extremely serious. The incident exposed the critical mistakes that turn ordinary cave trips into life-threatening emergencies. The first and most obvious problem was equipment. Joseph had entered the cave with inadequate lighting. When his light failed, he had no backup. Experienced cavers follow a simple rule set by the National Speleological Society: at least 3 light sources: primary light, backup light, emergency light. If one fails, you have 2 more. The second problem was knowledge. The explorers didn't know Hughes' cave in detail. They had no maps. They didn't know the cave's layout. They'd entered a complex cave system without planning. The third problem was communication. When Joseph separated, there was no communication. There was no buddy system requiring them to stay together. No predetermined meeting points. What happened to Joseph Hockett could have ended much worse. If rescue teams hadn't found him, if he'd stumbled and fallen in the darkness, if he'd become more seriously lost, the outcome could have been tragic. But it wasn't. He was found. He was rescued. He was brought out alive. This incident reminds us that caves are unforgiving environments. They don't care about your confidence or good intentions. They care about respect, preparation, and proper equipment. The National Speleological Society has established basic safety rules for cave exploration. Never enter a cave alone. Tell someone where you're going and when you'll return. Carry 3 independent light sources. Wear a helmet. Dress appropriately for cave temperature. These aren't suggestions. They're requirements for safe exploration. Joseph learned these lessons while sitting in complete darkness, waiting to be rescued. Hughes Cave is still open today. The passages continue to form a complex structure, winding left and right through limestone just as they did in 2013. But the cave witnessed rescue teams entering that June night with their lights and determination. They searched for a young man for whom a small mistake could have cost everything. Joseph Hockett entered Hughes Cave as an ordinary explorer. He emerged as someone who understood what it means when light completely disappears. He was lucky. The next person who ignores warnings may not be so lucky. Caves don't give second chances. They don't offer retreats. When you make a mistake underground, you pay the price. Sometimes with hours of fear, sometimes with your life. Joseph paid the price with fear, but he walked out. Not everyone does. The lesson is simple. If you're going to explore caves, do it right. Get training, get proper equipment, understand the risks, and never ever rely on a single light source. Because when that light goes out, the darkness doesn't care how confident you are. It doesn't care how ready for adventure you think you are. It just waits. And if you're not prepared, it takes you. In Hughes Cave, the problem was lack of preparation. At Little River Spring, everything seemed to be done right. There was training, there was experience, standard procedures were being followed. Yet on February 16, 2002, of 2 experienced cave divers, only 1 returned conscious. That's the difference. Hockett walked out. Pete Reagan didn't. Because in cave diving, you don't have to make a mistake for everything to go wrong. Sometimes a single moment beyond your control is enough. That's exactly what happened to Pete Reagan at Little River Spring. But that incident is the subject of our next video. That's all for now.